Hello, and welcome to Reawaken the Dream, a course for the writer mom or anyone who has to write in little segments of time because you don't have hours to string together to write. This is lesson 32, our 28th and final character trait. We have been working for a long time on building a very practical tool, the character profile tool, where we have been working on the power of living characters. So welcome to the last character trait of the whole course. We have 3 lessons to go, so don't look for your graduation day today. It's not this week, but it's coming up soon. Let's, as always, take a quick review of what we covered last week. Last week, our character trait was patriotism. Patriotism has to do with loyalty to one's country and the symbols of one's country. It's an asymmetrical character trait in that the two characters are not of equal status, but it's an empathy trait. The animal model is the animal hunting as a pack in unison, and honor, respect, and even giving service at the risk of one's life is what's entailed with patriotism. The loss and the victory states are on opposite sides of each other, and the question is the country going to have cohesion, a sense of we, a sense of us? Are the citizens going to have a sense of belonging, a sense of being protected? And they're just polar opposites for the loss and the victory. As always, all of the character traits assume a perfect world where the government, whatever it is of just and wonderful government to which patriotism would be very naturally required. The real challenge, though, if you're wanting to write a story where patriotism is involved, might be involved in turning the loss into a victory. That could be the real challenge. Well, what are we going to have for our 28th and final character trait? Are you ready? Humility. Humility is accepting our giftedness, accepting what comes to us as a package that we do not have control over, to the good or to the plus or to the minus, without either feeling glorified by the good things or feeling diminished by anything that might be problematic for us. Well, we're not going to jump right into the analysis here. It is a balance trait, so we'll keep that in mind. Let's instead begin, as we always do, with our scenarios. Linda always knew that she wanted to go back to work when the kids were older, and this was her chance. She'd been kind of looking around, but nothing had really appealed to her until she heard about a 50s diner that was opening in her neighborhood. Linda thought, wow, that's perfect for me. Linda was a total fan of the 1950s decor. She had done her whole kitchen in the 1950s look. So when she showed up for her interview, she was hired in an instant. And now it was her first day on the job, and she was all attired in her new uniform. And she had to admit, she looked pretty darn good. Slim and trim. She wondered why she hadn't put on the pounds the way most of her friends had. She didn't really know the answer to that question. She usually said something flippant like she preferred broccoli to burgers or iced tea over ice cream. But the reality was she didn't have any idea really why it was that she stayed so slim. Humility. Clarence came up through the ranks at the company. He was proud of the fact that he started on the production line. He was super proud of his first day when he was promoted to a job in the office. And now, 3 promotions later, he was head of logistics for the company and very, very happy with himself. But one thing he did not like. He did not like being surprised or challenged in departmental meetings, especially if someone from another department was present at the meeting. And Tom stepped over that line. Clarence called him in and gave him a good dressing down and ended up by telling him, "I don't ever want to hear anything like that come out of your mouth again. If you have something that you want to bring up at the meeting that's going to be a surprise or a challenge, you come to me first. If it's got legs, I'll give you the time, I'll introduce you. But don't you ever surprise me like that again." Humility? Well, not surprisingly, the following week, Tom asked for a transfer to Rick's department. Rick was really well known for the way he conducted meetings. He usually liked to start off the meeting with the most embarrassing incident about himself that happened since the last meeting that he could come up with. Well, he found that it put everyone at ease. Suddenly everyone was able to be honest about what was going on with their job and their position, and nobody felt like they had to cover their other side, if you know what I mean. Humility. Vern was the patron saint of problem production lines. It was back in the days when televisions had big vacuum tubes and so many electronic parts went into them, especially those color televisions. And every line had to keep up with quality and speed so that when they were all done, you could put the finished TV sets up and get them shipped. Well, Vern was the one they went to if a line was having problems with quality or schedule or both. Well, truth to tell, he could have been production manager of the whole company if he'd have been willing to accept the position, but he wasn't. He'd already been down that route, and nope, he did not want it. He hated stuffy meetings, and he loved being right with the people that worked on the line. So on this day, the big boss came in mid-morning and introduced Vern to his new production line that he was going to take over being the supervisor of. No sooner had the big boss gone away than the bell rang for break. So everyone got up, Vern got up with them, and they all went to the break room. Vern poured a cup of coffee, sat down with the group, and they enjoyed their coffee. Bell rang to end the break. Everybody got up except Vern. He looks around and he says, "Where are you guys going? I'm not done with my coffee." They all sat back down and had the beginnings of a team. Humility. So, let's do the analysis. Humility's triad of emotions. Humility is an interesting concept. The animal model is the pack again, but with just each animal being comfortable with his own place in the pack on a peaceful average day where there's not a whole lot going on. That's sort of the animal model for humility. Humility is all about the package of stuff that is ours to deal with for better or for worse. Some of the things that we might get might be intelligence, beauty, talents of various kinds, growing up in a wealthy family, being advantaged with great education, super teachers. The struggle with humility is to realize that the good things that came our way that we didn't do for ourselves are gifts. They're our gifts. They are not to our glory. They are for us to be grateful. And by the same token, the things that are more problematic that came our way, the disadvantages that we didn't ask for and didn't maybe deserve, whatever, we are not thereby diminished by them. And those both points are very important. And when you see two sides like that, you immediately think balance trait, and you'd be right. Humility is very intertwined with other of the character traits. Take, for example, the empathy trait of sincerity. Sincerity has to do with being open and honest in our relationships with other people, telling the truth, not concealing who we are, or at least, we can have privacy, not misrepresenting ourselves. And when you think about it, having humility is almost a requisite before we can feel comfortable opening up in sincerity. Likewise with magnanimity. Magnanimity is being joyful at the giftedness of others, the talents of others, the greatness of others. Well, if we're busy feeling diminished by what we don't have, it gets to be mighty hard to have magnanimity. So the presence of humility there also makes it much easier to have magnanimity. Gratitude, totally tied up with humility. If we don't have a sense of gratitude, then we're going to feel entitled to the good things we've got. We're going to think they're all for us, and we won't have a proper sense of humility. Likewise, if we do have a proper sense of humility and we look at the things that we're so thankful for, well, we're going to automatically have gratitude. But the character trait that is most closely intertwined with humility is honesty. The two enable and are requirements for one and the other. Honesty has to do with the things that we do, facing up with whatever we've done with our gifts for good or for ill, and making a proper assessment of where we contributed. If we have a sense of humility, then we will be able to face whatever we may have done in the past. Because a funny thing about things that are in the past, the things that are in the past are things that we cannot do anything about. Guess what? Once a thing slips into the past, boom, it's properly a part of a package. And we have to accept that it's there because we can't change it. It has to be accepted. Now we can do restitution and things like that, but we cannot change any reality that's actually in the past. Likewise, if we give a true, honest assessment of how we've performed in life, then we're probably going to end up with a sense of humility. Enough said. But we can really start to tell humility and honesty apart when we create a character where we split them, where we have a character that's strong in one and weak in the other. So let's take, for example, John. Now, John was very accepting of the fact that he was born blind. And he had an excellent sense of hearing, and he had an almost uncanny awareness of where he was spatially despite his lack of vision. And he was very, very grateful for that. Very strong. He had humility as a base trait. But John was unaware that he was becoming a complete jerk towards those who were helping him out. The people, some paid, some volunteers, some friends, who came into his life to help him manage and navigate his life, he was becoming mighty darn ungrateful to them and downright rude. Why, for heaven's sakes, he needed to take an honest look at how he was acting. Or split them the other way. Greta was a classic case of born on third base and thought she hit a triple. She had it all going for her, and she was just totally content in herself without giving any gratitude for the fact that it was all handed to her. Now, on top of that, she wasn't doing a particularly good job at living up to her responsibilities. Now, in fairness, she was aware of it, very aware of it. One might even say acutely aware of it. And she felt bad because she knew she was mistreating the people who were depending on her. Ta-da! Split. Okay. If honesty is the character trait that's most intertwined with humility, well then, meekness is the character trait that's most confused with humility. Meek and humble. Meek and humble. That might as well be one word, meek and humble. We can't even separate them in our brains. But humility, we know, is a balance trait, and meekness is an empathy trait. Meekness is being comfortable within ourselves and looking after the needs of others. Humility is our relationship within ourselves, how we assess ourselves. So they are clearly different. You might almost say that meekness is humility in action. That kind of fits pretty well. But if we really want to tease them apart and not just have meek and humble like one word, then we need to take a look at the lost states of humility. And being a balanced trait, of course, that means there's going to be two lost states. The first lost state is feeling glorified by all of our gifts. The other lost state is feeling diminished by what we don't have as gifts. Well, twin lost states? Yes. But when we take a look at meekness, then we can do a better job now of trying to construct a scenario where they are split apart. So let's take Cheryl. Cheryl is meek but not humble. Cheryl isn't particularly pretty. Her best friend, Marlene, however, is an absolute beauty. Cheryl just really likes Marlene and goes shopping with her, helps her pick out clothes that are flattering to her, does her hair even. Cheryl loves hanging around Marlene because Marlene gets a lot of attention, and Cheryl kind of enjoys the attention Marlene gets. Why, in fact, her very favorite thing is pointing out when an exceptionally handsome young man is eyeing Marlene from across the room. Okay, tell me now, what does she have with meekness and humility? One might say, well, she's both. She certainly is looking out for the needs of others. She's actually practically acting like Marlene's maid in waiting. But many would say that, oh, and look how humble she is too. But the fact is, she's in a lost state of humility because she's allowing herself to feel diminished by what she does not have. And without understanding those two lost states, we wouldn't realize that we've actually split those traits. And I will leave it to you as an exercise to create a scenario that goes the other way, where the character is strong in humility, but not so much so in meekness. That'll be a challenge. I'll leave that one for you. So then, what is the victory state of humility? Well, clearly it's not feeling glorified, not feeling diminished, but the simpler way of looking at it is simply not doing any measuring at all, not doing any comparing at all, simply accepting whatever package we have that is our package. And that is the simple victory state of humility, our final balance trait. Now let's take a look at the modifiers. Humility is a balance trait, and the balance traits come with a full boat of modifiers. So the first modifier is scale, and scale, of course, is what's at stake. So how are we going to find out what is at stake with humility? And the answer is what's at stake is what goes away in the lost state. So we really have to look at the lost states. Are there two things that are at stake, are at risk with humility? Let's take a look. On the first lost state is where the character credits himself with all of the blessings. Everything that's his advantage, he credits himself with. He's been to a great school. He was born to a wealthy family, good looking, everything that you could possibly want to think. So, that's such a character is actually in a lost state of humility, but something strange is going to be going on with that character because he's valuing himself based on something that was gifted to him. And that means he's going to feel at risk for losing it. And that is going to give him a certain sense of insecurity because he's always going to be comparing himself to other people. Am I as gifted as that person was? And that's going to lead to a sense of insecurity. If we look at the opposite lost state, the other side of things where our character didn't come into a wealthy family, didn't get to go to a great school, isn't super handsome, if he starts putting a cap on himself and feeling limited by the gifts he did not get, then you can see that their insecurity is also coming in there as well. So that means what's at stake, the scale, is the loss of a sense of self-worth. And that's a pretty valid, big thing to be at risk. And we have seen that before. That very same thing, self-worth, has shown up before in our balance traits. And in fact, the whole package of balance traits, when they're all lined up, boy, you end up with a person with an incredible comfort within themselves. So, what about agency? Is our character able to detach from his package? And when you remember that the package also includes anything that's in history now, because it's in history, it's a part of the package. That is a real avenue for a story right there. Agency can become a big factor in a story. And humility, you might not realize that the story is about humility, but if it's about the character's inability to detach from their package, it very much is about humility. And then, of course, limiting self-beliefs can tie back into agency as well. Our character might think that because they didn't get the right package, they can't do anything. Or they might think because they got the super package, well, the doors ought to open for them automatically, and what's the matter that they didn't? So self-beliefs can be limiting in two directions as well. So let's take a look now at our balance group, since it is now complete. We have 7 character traits in the balance group, and we have 3 subgroups. In the self-regulation subgroup, we've got moderation, orderliness, and self-control. These all have to do with our character's ability to get his life in balance. We have the attention subgroup, meekness and modesty, which have to do with whether the character is able to give attention to others, and to what extent does he require getting attention from others. And we also have the self-assessment subgroup, honesty and humility, where honesty has to do with how are you evaluating your behavior, your character's behavior, your character's contribution to what's going on in their lives. And humility, how accepting is the character able to be of the things that are out of the character's control. So that is the end of our, not only the end of the balance group, the end of all of our character traits. We've now covered all 28. But we have 3 lessons to go. This is 32 of 35. So in the next small unit of 3 lessons, we're going to work on our 3rd superpower. The first superpower was a short group of 3 lessons, which was the power of connecting threads, so we would never lose track of our story. The second superpower was the giant one, the power of living characters, where we went through all the character traits. And the third, no spoilers here. See you next week for the 3rd one. And by the way, we are now finished with our reference sheets. I hope you've been making them, because the reference sheets that you make in your own handwriting, where you selected your own keywords to describe the traits, are the ones that you will find the easiest to use. Starting with our review segment, we will also spend 3 weeks with a taxonomy review of the character traits, where we'll treat them in a completely different manner, top down, in an organized way, which might have been the way we would have discussed the lessons, except I wanted always to have the emotional side up front. And emotions have their own order, and it isn't taxonomy. So see you next week. Bye-bye.